What you just heard is one of the sickest riffs of all time, and it's not even from a metal band. And I know what some of you are thinking right now. Eyal, this is a metal channel. Why are we watching a Muse documentary? But if you think that there's nothing that a metal producer can learn from a band like this, you're dead wrong, and it's to your detriment. When I first heard their album Absolution, it completely blew my mind. They were blending classical music with Queen-like vocal harmonies and genuinely heavy progressive parts, and somehow it all made perfect sense. Their approach to dynamics, arrangement, and pure creativity is something that every single one of us should be studying. Today I'm going to react to the Making of Absolution, because getting to see how a band this creative actually works in the studio, that's fascinating. I know for a fact that nothing they do is phoned in. Every detail is meticulously planned and executed. Let's see what we can steal for our own productions. For those who don't know me, I'm Eyal Levi, CEO of URM Academy. I've been a producer and a guitarist in my band Doth since 1999 and have been playing way longer than that. I have spent my entire career dissecting what makes great albums great, and I guarantee you that the lessons in this documentary directly apply to making better metal. All right, let's dive in. That's the album intro, actually. Such an epic intro. If you've never heard it, basically it starts like a military march and then this piano thing comes in. But what's really, really cool about it is they didn't find some sample of a military march. They actually recreated it by stomping in that, I don't know, looks like an empty room. I couldn't tell if the walls were concrete or drywall or whatever, but they made it sound like a lot more people. But there's a lot more going on if you notice. It's got them stomping, it's got them clapping, it's got them hitting percussion instruments, it's got the floor toms, and it's got bass drums inside of a swimming pool. That's a lot of stuff put together to make this super epic sound. It's a lot more powerful than if they just found samples of somebody marching and then added the drum set on top of it. I mean, it would have still been cool, but the opening to this record is very iconic and very epic, and now you see why. There's a lot of ingredients put into that. Let's just take a look again at how many things are going on in there. So you've got stomping, toms, clapping, some weird percussion instrument or a pipe. Looks like paint cans. And the bass drums inside of a stone-walled room that has a bunch of whirlpools in it. It's a lot of stuff. He's actually a great pianist. Very, very talented individual. Really good at guitar. Really good at piano, really good at singing. I bet he plays a bunch of other instruments as well.
That one originally was the one that had big orchestra on it, but we ended up taking it away because it was too much. But there was two other songs on the album that have got strings on. And I met this woman, a lady from England, called Gojira, and together we wrote the strings. And it's something I wanted to just to experiment and just to see if I was able to, collaborate with someone else on writing strings, which was really interesting. And the songs that I've used them in are not heavy guitar songs. They're mostly piano-based songs. And I think the piano and the strings are made to go together. When you hear a piano going and the strings going together, it's just like one balances the other perfectly.
So it's interesting. They wrote a whole string arrangement for this song and didn't end up using it because of something really key that he said. He felt like guitar and strings, well, heavy guitar and strings didn't go together that well. And actually, in mixing metal, that's a huge challenge. When you're doing orchestral metal where you have orchestral instruments on top of distorted guitars, that might be one of the hardest things possible to mix. So for a band like this that has a lot more space in their arrangements, you can see he's already making really good arrangement choices. They did go through the trouble of writing, arranging, and recording a full string section for this song and decided not to use it and to use it in other songs with more sparse arrangements so that everything could be clear and have its own space. That's wise arrangement, which leads to a better mix. Now in metal, the challenge is to fit all these things together that shouldn't work together. But you kind of should take something from this and realize that the more space you leave, the easier it's going to be to mix. And speaking of mixing, this video is brought to you by Nail the Mix. If you want to learn how to mix and master metal, Nail the Mix is the place to do it straight from the best. Mixers like Will Putney, Buster Odeholm, Jens Bogren, Nolly, TLA, David Bendeth, and artists such as Gojira, Meshuggah, Periphery, Opeth, Nickelback, and over 100 more. At the start of the month, we released the raw multi-tracks from the session so you can download them straight into your DAW and mix the song from scratch. Getting your hands on this kind of source material is an incredible learning opportunity, just so you can see what the standard really is like at this level. Then, at the end of the month, the mixer does a live stream where they break down exactly how they mixed it on the record and answers your questions live. You can also join our monthly mixing competition. Submit your mix, vote for your favorites, and win prizes like microphones, guitars, plugins, gear, and a lot more cool stuff. And your membership comes packed with extras. All the URM plugins, MixLab with over 150 tutorials, Riff Hard for guitarists, and access to our private community on Discord and Facebook. So if you're serious about leveling up your mixes and learning from the very best, check out nailthemix.com today. It's at the link in the description of this video.
I'm a big fan of three-piece bands, and as you know, 10 some years of doing this stuff, I mean, like, you guys are rocking this three-piece band around right now. Do you ever feel that on stage? Do you ever like actually go like, yeah, we're a three-piece?
I think like because there's not another guitarist for me, I can like make more noise with one guitar. You know, get away with more stuff. Whereas if there's two guitarists, you've got to be like sort of balance yourselves out so you don't offend the other guitarist. You know what I mean? But I don't have to. I've got no one to offend.
It's actually really wild how big they sound for a three-piece band. I know that nowadays they have a fourth member on stage. It's actually Dan Lancaster, the producer from the metal community who's done like Bring Me the Horizon, among other bands. A total genius, is now kind of like a live member who's also worked on lots of their productions. But in those days, they were a three-piece and they still sounded huge. And one of the ways that they achieved that is because the bass player uses all kinds of cool distortion effects and all kinds of interesting stuff to make the bass sound like more than just a bass, so that when Matt's playing guitar or Matt's playing piano, it doesn't lose the power.
Where are you headed?
Arenas.
They weren't kidding. This is actually a really good example right here of how much a song transforms between the writing process and its final form. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I know for a fact that lots of times people will take the first thing that they wrote and just move chronologically from there. So first riff that they wrote is the first riff in the song. Second riff that they wrote is the second riff in the song. Third is the third riff, and so on and so forth, without ever actually going back and modifying things. It's weird. Like, they get really, really precious about the stuff that they wrote. But what you're seeing here with Muse is they're sounding like shit in a sound check, but they're getting the chord changes right. By the time that it gets to the real song, he's no longer strumming the chords. He's finger picking. It feels different. And it's because it's gone through several layers of basically QC and iterations and evolutions. And I suggest you do the same with your songs. I really appreciate that they're making and actually playing all of these sounds that they have on the record. They're not using samples. It's kind of like Foley in a movie production. Was that the beginning of divine intervention? Let's see. It's close. One thing that I appreciate is that it seems like at this point in their career, they were really starting to blow up, and they had to write a follow-up album to Origins of Symmetry, which became Absolution. But when a band is blowing up, they have a lot of shows to play. It's tough. That's why I know that Absolution wasn't their sophomore record, but still, when a band is touring all of the time, it's really, really tough to come up with new material during touring. And that's why you sometimes get what's known as the sophomore slump, because they have all this time to write the first record and no time for the subsequent records. And so, as you've already seen twice now, in the middle of sound checks, they're trying new material. And it might not sound great in the sound checks because it's brand new and they're just trying things out, but they're getting together when they can as a band and actually running through this stuff before they get to the studio. Very wise.
You know, just before we came into the studio, we had like a list of maybe 20 or so songs, and maybe like 5 or 6. Yeah, you know, right at the last minute before recording, maybe sort of disappeared.
The strange thing is, a lot of those songs we thought were really good at the time.
Yeah.
Eternally Missed, like that. We thought that was like the best song we had.
Yeah.
And now it's not even going to be a B-side, I don't think.
Interesting how that works. They thought that they had 20 songs going into the studio, and as it turns out, they only had 5 or 6 out of that batch, and what they liked the best ended up not even getting used. That's why when you hear about bands writing 30, 40, 50 songs for an album, that's why, because what they're trying to do is get as much material as possible so that you can only pick the great ones, because it's a numbers game, really. The more you write, the more often you're going to get to a really great song. You can't expect every single song to be great. And if you have a lot to choose from, you really can get rid of the bad ones, get rid of the mediocre ones, and only take the strongest material possible. So that's why you should write a lot. But I guess they thought 20 would be enough, and then they end up where only 6 make the cut, and they have to scramble to make new ones, which explains to me why they were working during sound checks and whenever they could. That's a lot of pressure to get this done quickly. So you don't even notice anything falling out. Matt went to play at higher notes right there. I know the bass is really loud, but typically when you have a one guitar band and the guitar player starts to play leads, it does feel like something drops out, and maybe that's okay based on the arrangement. It works for certain bands like Pantera, for instance, where, you know, Dimebag would go to a solo and all you'd have is bass and drums underneath it most of the time, and it would work even though something did drop out. The solos were so amazing that you just focus on them. But in this case, you don't even notice something falling out because the bass is taking up so much space.
I think it's 16. I think you guys just played 8. So you'll see the same thing again, so it's 8 measures. Same thing again. But don't try and count it. What's the BPM? Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah? Yeah. Do you call that one measure? 1, 2, 3, 4, that's one measure. Okay, so it's... You can just signal him when the break comes. The chord is 22 measures.
22 measures. That's an interesting number of measures. And basically what's going on there is that it seems like some of them were feeling the pulse differently from each other. That's why he was asking what the producer considered to be the BPM and the 1, 2, 3, 4, because when he was saying you did it 16 times versus 8 times that I want you to do, they got to get on the same page about what that even means. Because depending on where the pulse is, if you're feeling it in 8th notes, quarter notes, 16th notes, that's going to determine how long the passage actually is. And because they're playing it like a live band, that's why it matters that they're all on the same page. Like if they were all recording individually, then it wouldn't matter as much. And also the drums would already be done. And so they would have something definite to play to. But they're doing a lot of this stuff live. And so they have to be able to transition together. So octaves on guitar, notice he's down picking all of them. For octaves played that high up at this kind of speed, down picking typically sounds a lot better. I mean, you could strum them, but they're not going to sound as percussive and I guess as dominant or confident as they would with downs. Obviously, there comes a tempo where you have to strum them, but if you can get away with down picking, if you're playing that high and octaves, do it.
Well, actually, before you do that, then, do you want to do? I want to add in whatever is the best shaker. Yeah, there's one of those shakers that is really intense. Like sort of, it's like very quiet, very soft. It's quite intense vibe. I don't mind hearing that coming in from verse 2 onwards.
That's another smart move right there. So he wants to bring in a shaker that's very, very subtle, but on verse 2. And this is a way that in a lot of pop or rock productions, people differentiate verse 1 from verse 2, say that the music is the same and the vocals are following the same, I guess, melody. Even though the lyrics are different, you kind of got to do a bit more to differentiate them. Sometimes the arrangement will change completely, but even adding elements that weren't there, even if they're almost subconscious or you have to hear them on headphones, they change how it feels, and therefore it feels like the song is evolving. You definitely want verse 2 to feel like the story is progressing. If it's exactly like verse 1, it risks feeling static, and you never want that.
What's your favourite shake you've heard so far?
I also appreciate that they're trying several different shakers to get the exact perfect one. They're not just going with the first thing they find. Notice how it's going backwards. This isn't just a cool camera trick. That's actually how it is on the record. Interesting that they have it in the documentary where the video is also reversed. I've always wondered in this song what that weird rhythmic sound in the background is. It sounded backwards, but lots of times when you reverse things, the rhythm can feel a little wonky, but yeah, it's actual percussion, a percussion part they spent a long time on reversed. Maybe there's a few other things in there, but you can hear it ever so subtly behind the vocals.
As good as it gets.
It was good. Well, they're one of the few bands that seem like they're actually trying to do something different, pushing into areas a lot of other bands hadn't pushed into.
I agree with that. And I actually think that their use of synth is really, really great. I think lots of times when you combine synth and rock or synth and metal, it can get pretty cheesy at times. Like if it sounds like a Casio or just, I don't know, cheap. But then there's some bands who do it really, really well. I consider Muse to be one of those bands who actually use the synth properly.
One of the things I think that I find really interesting is I worked for this composer named Philip Glass, and these guys didn't know it to the extent that they were using a lot of composition methods that were very similar to his.
Oh, really?
I think that's what he's in a rock context.
Actually, that confirms a lot of what I thought. If you don't know, Philip Glass is, I don't know if he's still alive, but he was considered a minimalist classical composer. And I know that a lot of the, it's like the fine art world, a lot of the traditional orchestral or classical people kind of considered Philip Glass to be kind of, I guess, not that great. But I've always thought his stuff was cool, and it's because he did a lot of repetitive chord progressions and arpeggiated parts and didn't have themes the way that traditional classical music had. But a lot of Muse's parts sound like they could be on a Philip Glass record, with a lot of the way that the chords move, the way that they're arpeggiated. And the producer actually confirms that a lot of the production methods are the same without the band even knowing that they were doing something similar. So that's kind of interesting. don't know if you've ever tried to record drums outside. My first time ever trying it, I was really, really surprised by how shitty it sounded. Now, I have a feeling that because of where they're doing it, and it seems like it's a different location, but with the stone wall and I don't know, it looks like maybe gravel or concrete floor, maybe it's a little bit more reverberant, or maybe there's a little bit of reverb that they added, or who knows. I can't even tell where the mics are. But in general, you might think that drums are going to sound a lot more open and spacious because you're outside, but in reality, if there's nothing around it to bounce off of, they're actually going to sound really dry and flat. So if you're going to record something outside, you got to make sure it's in the right place outside and that you're miking it from the right spot, because otherwise it's going to be garbage.
If you're going to do it, I would try to do it as quick as you can, because somebody will.
Oh, you think so?
Well, they won't like.
I.e., hurry your fucking ass up. That's cool. Tracking the drums and the bass live while the drums are not even in a drum room, but outside. And I have a feeling that that stone courtyard is the reason that they did it. From the first shot, I couldn't tell that it was basically in an L-shaped or a U-shape, but there's probably something about the reverberation off of all that stone that gives it that particular sound. Maybe the tractor too. Also, once again, notice the bass tone, super distorted, even on this part that's very tranquil, ethereal, beautiful, spacious, subtle, soft, whatever, any of those adjectives. He's actually playing a fully distorted bass tone. And normally you would think that that wouldn't work. Normally it wouldn't work, but somehow they figured out how to do it right.
So how's that going to go exactly?
Actually, that method of visually representing what you're hearing is something that my very first collegiate level music professor taught me how to do, had me do. We were doing these exercises called active listening, where you're training yourself to really notice, visually represent everything that you're hearing without using theory and without using notation. So basically, you kind of have to describe it and draw what you're hearing, and it gives you a different perspective of what's going on. So I see right there what he's doing is that synth pattern. He's basically drawing the texture that it's going to add to the music, not the notes, not the chord progressions, that's something else, but just the texture and the feeling of what it's going to add is represented by that drawing. Notice earlier he said that they saved the orchestral arrangements for songs where there's a lot more space, and this is a perfect example. Very subtle drums, very subtle bass. That gives all the room in the world for the strings. I don't know if you notice what sounds like that eerie reverb in the background. That's the vocal harmony that the three of them were singing at the same time. So I guess it's heavily reverb, maybe even modulated reverb, I can't tell, but that's kind of what's giving it that atmosphere on top of the lead vocal and the strings.
Two big muffs.
All right, there's a clue. Two big muffs, I guess, in parallel or probably a series. It's a lot of distortion. notice how solid that bass player is playing those arpeggios with his fingers? A lot of bass players, and someone in the comments of another video said that I keep pointing out really good bass players, and that's because they're rare. It's super rare to find really good bass players, and this one's a hero, but just notice how solid he is.
Basically, a lot of songs he puts like a spotlight right in the middle, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So you get like full on spotlight that goes out as well and all this.
That's a cool guitar.
What does the back of it look like? But doesn't the lights go up the neck as well?
No, that's on my black guitar, which I should have put on. I've got a black guitar with the blue lights on the neck.
But when you put your hand along the back of it, it looks like there's lights behind it.
There's lights coming out the side of it, yeah.
Oh, wow.
He's got all kinds of really, really interesting guitars. If you want to see some creative guitars, just check out the shit that Matt Bellamy has and comes up with. I actually think that Manson Guitars is his company, but there's all kinds of crazy shit built into his guitars. Way crazier than just lights.
I remember the first time we met Rich, I was very nervous. We were having a rehearsal, and I remember having a bit of an argument with Dom and Chris because I didn't feel comfortable with someone coming in to try and talk about the creation, you know, creative ideas. And but luckily when Rich came in, everything he said was very, very, you know, very interesting. Very, it seemed like he really understood a lot about the band, maybe more than any other person we've worked with before.
So the Rich that Matt's talking about is Rich Costi, who's super famous, super legendary, amazing producer. Even a band who was already big at this point in time was, I guess, hesitant about bringing in a producer because they're so serious about their music. They didn't want someone to come in and mangle it. After talking with Rich, they felt like his ideas were in line with theirs. That's why it's so important for a band to do their research about who they're hiring. If it's a band that has a very, very strong vision, you need to bring in someone who's aligned with that vision, or the record's going to be a disaster. Bring in someone who's really good and aligned with the vision, then sky's the limit with what you can do. That's really cool. I don't know exactly what that is. I don't know if he's just shaking an amp around or if like that's what that thing does that does that bendy sound when you move it around, or just something that he figured out, but that's really cool. If someone who's watching this knows what that is, let me know in the comments. Once again, you've got a song that the hookiest part, or arguably the hookiest part, is the bass line. I just keep talking about this bass player because he's such a unique and powerful force in this band. A lot of their more famous riffs, like the one in Hysteria or this one, is actually him playing bass. And that's not normal. That's not typically what happens. I know I'm not alone in thinking this, but out of every aspect of being in a band, probably the worst is making music videos. It's because you're in there for a day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. They're long ass days, and you're miming the song the whole time. And I mean, if playing one show in a day is tiring physically, you have to basically bring the energy of a live performance for like 12 hours straight. Before anyone says that nobody should complain, this is not any complaining. This is just reality. There are some aspects of this job that are harder than others, and some that take a lot of physical stamina. Basically, yeah, making a music video, you're required to perform at 100% or maybe even 110% because you always have to turn up the intensity for the camera for multiple 12-hour days. And the fact that you're not actually hearing what you're playing because you're miming is very, very disconcerting. So you have to sit there and pretend to play, and you feel like an idiot because you're not actually playing it, but you got to look convincing. So there's this weird psychological and physical thing that goes into making a good music video that to me is the worst part of being in a band, and to a lot of other people that I know, same thing. Super iconic riff.
Times are
Muse lyrics are very interesting because there's lots of times where you think they're talking about something positive, like a love song or something motivational or whatever, because of the parts of the song where you can understand the lyrics, like a chorus. And you go and you read the lyrics and you realize that they're dark as shit. So notice, this is kind of, I'm not going to say heavy, but a more energetic part, and there's no guitar in it. So there's orchestra, vocals, piano, obviously drums and bass, and it doesn't feel like there's anything missing. And I think that's because, again, they made the smart choice of not using heavy guitar at the same time as the orchestra. So, but they still have something taking the guitar's place, which is the piano. Yeah, there weren't too many rock bands, especially in this era, who would get all like crazy like this and start just having straight up orchestral music and piano solos like this. It just didn't really happen. You maybe heard this kind of stuff a couple decades earlier, or 3 decades earlier, with bands like the Beatles or Pink Floyd, or some of the progressive bands from the 70s. But in the early 2000s, you got to remember what was going on. That was basically the peak of nu metal. There was definitely nothing like this going on in popular rock or metal. That put them, from what I've heard from speaking to people, put them in a really weird spot with their label, because labels are basically essentially banks and marketing machines, and they knew how to promote what was popular at the time, but they had no idea what to do with this band that didn't really fit into any categories exactly. But they also knew that this band was so fucking good that they couldn't just get rid of them. So it was a huge confusion for the longest time. Just what are we going to do? But let's just keep letting them go. And I think that was the smartest thing. Nobody got in their way artistically. They just let them do their thing. And then it grew organically over time. And, you know, now they're an arena and stadium level band. They actually have been for quite a while. Even if you're not a fan of this band, the thing that I think you should take away from it is that it is possible to go really, really far and get really big with real music that doesn't bend the knee to anybody.
Could I call the song Synth Absolution?
Yeah.
To call the album Absolution and the song Synth Absolution?
I think that's good.
I guess sometimes naming the album is that simple. Just come up with a word and have a quick agreement. It's just interesting because you hear about, and I know that I've been through so many situations where it takes forever to think of it, and this is very chill.
Bye. Phone Chris. Oi. What?
So you see, what did I tell you? Not a metal band, but the way that they build songs is a masterclass. All the attention to detail, all the fearless experimentation, it's all there. The biggest takeaway for any producer, metal or not, is how they use dynamics and create impact. A heavy riff is cool, but a heavy riff that comes in after a quiet, tense verse makes for a really powerful moment. It's not just about being loud all the time, it's about making the loud parts count. And that's a lesson that applies to making brutal music hit even harder. So what's your favorite Muse album, and what was your biggest takeaway from this documentary? Let me know in the comments. As always, like, share, subscribe. See you next time.